I'm using your Starbucks coaster.
Hey, that seems appropriate. You have your Starbucks drink on my 3D printed Starbucks coaster.
It's the only coffee shop around here that's open past 4 p.m., or else I would not go there.
Yeah, that's fair.
I feel wrong going to Starbucks, but sometimes you just do what you got to do.
Yeah. I had a Starbucks coffee this morning.
Oh, Daniel.
They're also one of the fastest coffee shops, and they're everywhere. So
That's
it's
true.
like anywhere you're going, there's a Starbucks on the correct side of the road, and it's super fast to go there.
That's true.
I got to say, though, the coffee shop with the best pup cups is Dutch Brothers.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that. That's good to know.
Yeah. They have they give you a nice like wide cup, which is easier for the dog to get their snout into.
Okay.
And it's probably like larger than most of them, just generally. And they put little like a couple little crunchy treats on top. So
Do they still result in whipped cream all over the inside of your car?
I'd say it depends on the dog, but that's definitely a risk.
It
definitely can happen.
Ooh, boy. I mean, dog loves pup cups.
Yeah.
But, oh boy.
But in this scenario, are you like holding the cup for the dog, or are you just like chucking it back there?
If I chuck it back there, it's
because if you're just like tossing it over your shoulder, then I'm not surprised.
yeah. But if I hold it, it becomes like a spray event where the lapping just starts ejecting whipped cream everywhere.
Yep.
It's a disaster.
Yep.
Pup cups are a lot.
Now you have two dogs. I've met both of them. I'm very familiar with both of them. I feel like one of those dogs would be worse about this than the other. Are they about the same? Or
your feeling is accurate.
Okay.
There is one dog that is way, way worse.
Yeah.
That specific dog has, I believe, associates treats with the smell of coffee shops if I leave any coffee cup, like it doesn't matter what I was drinking, what kind of coffee I was drinking out of it. Could be mocha, could be a latte, could just be Americano or black coffee or whatever. If I leave that around the house unattended, they will like finish the coffee or it will take the cup and like clean it out.
Oh man.
And it's like, oh yeah, I'm done with this paper coffee cup from local coffee shop. Let me just set it here on the counter and then leave it there, come back, it is gone.
Yeah. And then you find it, it's like spotless. The inside
Yeah. And
clean.
it's still it's standing up still. I'm like, how is this standing up in the middle of the floor but perfectly clean?
Interesting.
I'm worried about the amount of chocolate my dog has consumed up to this point. But it seems fine.
Yeah. I mean, pretty big dog, so it takes a lot.
He really loves mochas and sweets and lattes and it's that like what is the Pavlovian response for pup cups has become a real problem in my life.
Welcome back to the Camera Gear Podcast. I'm Daniel.
And I'm Lucas.
And we're here today to talk about the gear, software, and techniques we use to shoot photos and video.
I was watching the on-stage camera person at church running cameras on Sunday, and that person was like, it's an A7 III, and they're broadcasting, over Turkey or whatever, but it's that with a zoom lens, and the person was holding obviously the camera on the grip with the right hand, but then the left hand, which is kind of holding and moving the lens through focus and zoom, for a good chunk of the time was in like an overhand position, where if you're holding a camera with your right hand, you can either with the palm of your hand and your thumb facing out, kind of cup the lens that way, or you can turn your thumb facing towards you and overhand it the other way.
Almost like if you're holding a water bottle and you're drinking out of it, like if you hold a water bottle in your left hand, you start drinking out of it. It's like he had his hand in that position.
Correct. Yeah. Like thumb facing up situation instead of thumb facing down situation. And whenever I shoot, I 99.9% of the time am in like a hand cupping the lens, thumb pointing in the direction of the shot type posture. And I know that like if you raise it up to a certain extent, like over your head, you're not necessarily going to be able to like modulate the lens in that way. And so if I'm doing an overhead shot, which I never do because I am 100 feet tall, and I'm literally holding my hands over my head right now. It's ridiculous. Then maybe I will go into like an over the hand position for the lens.
Yeah.
But when watching that, like he didn't really switch to another one. And I always feel like it's kind of awkward overhand a lens, especially like lower. Like if you're holding it chest level and you're overhanding, it feels weird and awkward. And I want to get your thoughts and opinion on how you hold your camera.
Yeah. So whenever you first started talking about this, my initial reaction was like, overhand seems really weird. I would never do that.
But you overhand all the time.
Well, yeah, I kind of realized what it is for me is if I'm holding the camera up to my face, like, I'm using the viewfinder, like, or if I'm using the screen, but it's just like at that height.
Yeah.
Then yeah, I think I do use it overhand in that situation. And I feel like most people do, because if you hold your hands up to your face, I feel like it's really not ergonomic to have your lens hand underhand at that point. Like for me, I feel like my wrist has to bend really weirdly to do that.
I mean, I don't know. Like when I hold a camera up to my face, like it's like that feels natural
like that
to
works
me.
for you.
Yeah, like
interesting.
And it's like it's so natural for me that whenever I started watching you use a camera, when you didn't know I was watching you, and I'm like, why is he doing that wrong?
When I'm shooting video, a lot of times I'm not holding the camera up to my face because, like,
right.
Especially if I have a camera rig, I might have a monitor on top of the camera, or even if I'm just using the camera by itself, I probably have the screen like flipped out and like tilted at an angle because you want to get like a lower shot or something. And definitely in those cases, it's underhand. And I'd also go farther and say that usually I'm supporting most of the weight of the camera with my left hand. Maybe not always, but like if I'm trying to get a really stable shot, it's almost like instead of gripping the camera firmly, like with the grip, I'm kind of like resting it on my lens hand,
like into your hand.
Yeah, and
that makes sense too.
I do that for a stable shot, and also with something that's really heavy. So like a rigged out camera, or that one you're talking about for live broadcast that has a Teradek on top, like it's a pretty heavy setup, and so a lot of times I kind of do that. But because I feel like you can support the weight of the camera better underhanded as opposed to overhanded.
So like from if you just have a standard, like just a regular mirrorless or DSLR type camera, and you have say a 24-70 on it, and you're using the EVF,
definitely overhand in that
like
case.
I haven't been like purposely monitoring lots of photographers whenever they're like, if someone's taking a picture, like making a checkbox in my mind of which one are they doing. Am I the weird one or are you the weird one?
I don't know, man. I mean, now you've got me questioning it, but I feel like in that situation, like looking through the EVF, I feel like overhand is like the standard way to do it. I mean, maybe you should start paying attention if you see pictures of photographers.
What I would rather is if everyone could just write in and tell us if you're an overhand or an underhand when you're holding that viewfinder up to your eye. And that way I can justify myself.
Yeah, I would be curious to hear what other people do because, it's one of those things where it's like I don't consciously think about that, but when you point it out, I'm kind of like, wait, what do I do?
Interesting. Okay, that's all I really want to talk about there. I thought it was like, that's two people that are overhand. Maybe I'm the strange one.
Oh, that's very possible. It's quite possible.
Very typical. Okay, let's talk about some cinema cameras, Daniel.
Yeah, sounds good. I think there's quite a bit of cinema camera news.
All right, so Blackmagic announced their Ursa Cine 12K and Ursa Cine 17K like last fall. No, that wasn't that. Or like
I think
that
it was
long
this
ago.
year.
It was sometime this summer.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, we covered it on the show.
Those are like basically out or coming out. The 65mm 17K hasn't quite hit, but like we have information on it. Blah blah blah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The 12K Ursa Cine is the one that's like a 35mm 3x2 sensor. That one, CineD has finally done their like testing on the camera.
Yeah.
And usually I like to like read through their stuff and check out their tests because they do a good like dynamic range test with the xylophone. That's not what it's called. And then they have a standard test where they'll do like a normal shot and check like how far you can push it. How many stops you can recover.
Yeah.
One way or the other. The latitude is basically what that's called. So they'll check the rolling shutter, the dynamic range, and the latitude of the sensor.
Yeah.
And use that as like and basically they'll take out that information, standard test, and then they'll stick it in their camera database, and you can kind of look and compare and see from a technical standpoint, like how are these sensors performing in comparison to like everything else that's out there.
Yeah.
And like like with everything, it's like if you have a camera that works for what you're doing, like great. And most mirrorless cameras are going to be in, the 12 to 14 stop range for dynamic range. And you're kind of like limited to like a 12-bit sensor is going to kind of do what a 12-bit sensor is going to do, but it's good to see if there's anything like exceptionally weird with like the readouts or the modes and that sort of stuff. Yeah. So CineD finally did their test. Finally, I know like how. I mean, we've just been waiting.
Yeah, we've all been waiting with bated breath.
Yeah. But
I was kind of curious, to see these sorts of results, because I feel like with Blackmagic, a lot of times it seems like their cameras have really good specs, and especially like high resolution. Like this 12K thing seemed right up their alley. Like it's the kind of thing they do. But a lot of times it seems like their stuff doesn't necessarily like have the same technical performance that some of these other brands do.
Yeah, they're like maybe saving a little money here or there, and like this camera is cheap for what it is. It's like $16,000, but it's like pretty cheap for what it is. Yeah. And yeah, normally like Blackmagic doesn't ever overpromise on a camera. They're like, here are the specs.
Yeah.
And it kind of does what you expect it to do. This one was pretty impressive.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess like what I'm saying is I was kind of surprised at these results that we're about to go through, because I felt like the 12K at that price seems like really good, and I was kind of thinking, what's the catch going to be? And I don't know, this didn't exactly go the way I thought it was. I thought there were going to be some bigger caveats than what we see in these results.
Yeah, it just seems good. Like this is good. I didn't know really. Anyways, yeah. Okay, so just kind of to recap on the camera itself, I basically copy and pasted our show notes from forever ago just to kind of do a quick run through on it. So it's obviously standard full frame 35 by 23 millimeter sensor. It's 12K resolution. They quoted up to 16 stops of dynamic range, which is just like the raw profile can handle that many stops of data. We'll get to like what the actual Tesla dynamic range is. It could shoot open gate. It could support anamorphic resolutions. It had 4K, 8K, and 12K, and all of those could be oversampled down or line skipped or whatever. And then you could shoot a 12K 17 by 9 up to 100 frames per second. And you could do 8K in like a 2.4 to 1 widescreen at like 244. So it had a few like chop off the top and the bottom, shoot a wide video and get like high speed. And then it had support for what was like PL and EF and then Hasselblad mount. And then it had like a built-in ND, and those were optical, right? 246.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I think does this one have a flippy screen on the side, just like the standard Ursa flip out screen?
I think it does. I know it has that side assistant screen on the other side.
Right.
But I think it does have a flip screen on the other side.
And then this one has the USB-C for the eyepiece or the extra monitor, which is similar to what would like support the new Pixis monitor that they announced. And then kind of any of those typical like USB-C monitors. And then otherwise it's just like it's got like a flash module for, you can do like CF Express or like their storage modules. And I think that was the gist of it, cinema camera stuff.
Yeah.
Decent specs.
And the price, like you said, was kind of the big factor, where this is a full frame type sensor, but it was only like $16,000.
Yeah, it was like $15K if you didn't want the eyepiece, and $16,500 if you wanted the viewfinder.
Yeah,
something like that. All right. So for the testing, they did the rolling shutter, and if you shoot open gate in the full resolution 12K mode, you're getting 12 milliseconds for rolling shutter.
That was way faster than I expected.
It's crazy fast.
It's really good.
I was like, oh, this is going to be like 20-something milliseconds. Yeah,
because that's normally what it is, right? Like for a normal mirrorless camera, like typically like your baseline is somewhere around that.
Yeah, like any of your not stacked, and this isn't a stack sensor, any of your like not stacked full frame cameras, like say an A7 IV, that's like 23 milliseconds.
Yeah. So that's kind of like where you would normally expect to be.
Yeah, and like you kind of want to be closer to 15 or under to make that rolling shutter a little less obvious. Then you can start getting into doing a little faster pans, less of a jello effect on motion. Right. You really want to get under 15. This coming in at 12 milliseconds at full resolution open gate is nuts.
Yeah.
That's like super super good. And I don't know, it's like being able to shoot open gate at 12K is great. Because like if you're shooting anything that's where you think you're going to reframe in post, or you're going to like shoot in B-RAW and then downsample that into 4K, you're going to have so much detail. That's great. I'm super pumped about that. If you shoot in the 8K mode, that's like 16:9 or whatever. It's not the full 3:2 open gate.
Yeah.
8K is 5.5 milliseconds.
So fast.
Which
it's
is
almost
nuts.
as fast as an XH2S. Like a stacked sensor.
No, it's faster.
Is it?
Yeah, it's a little faster than XH2S. Because I think the XH2S is around 6.
Okay. For some reason I thought it was like 3 or 4.
It's like almost as fast as a Venice kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's a little nuts how fast it is.
Yeah. I mean, that's really impressive, and like especially that open gate number, because I think about the stuff we shoot where we have to deliver in everything from like a 32:9 ultra wide screen to to vertical
2.35 to 1, 16:9, 9:16.
Yeah, I would love to be able to shoot in 12K because we'd just be able to crop
all the Ks
in so many ways.
Yep. Then you wouldn't even have to frame. You just shoot as wide as you want.
Yeah. But then if you really need to get motion stuff, like being able to go down to 5.5 in the 8K mode is really, really good.
Yeah, it's super good. And then for dynamic range, that it performed also impressive. Like obviously, you shoot in a few different modes. You can do down sampling to kind of cut down your noise. They were saying 16 stops of dynamic range for the sensor. What the tests kind of showed was depending upon the mode, if you ignore, like if you say like a signal noise ratio of 0, like just what is the pure stops off of this thing that's being read by the xylophone test, not what it's called. It was around 15-ish. It was like 15.3, 15.2 stops.
Surprisingly close to like the theoretical maximum of 16.
Yeah, exactly. Just super impressive there. And obviously, like if you want something that's more like a signal to noise ratio of like 1 or 2 for it to look clean-ish. And I mean, you can probably do a lot of that with noise reduction in DaVinci Resolve. But even still, depending upon the mode, if you're like oversampling or just shooting open gate and like if you shoot at high resolution, you're going to pick up more noise because it's more pixels. But those were still getting in like the 12 to 14 range, like 13.8 or like 12.3 for a signal to noise ratio of 2, which is like, you may say like, oh, well, if you compare that to like CineD's test of an XH2S, where you like maybe you run it through noise reduction or something, you can get like a 13 stop dynamic range, 13.2, something like that. But this is doing that plus. Like that's kind of like the baseline is basically the best that a mirrorless camera can do right now. And then it goes up from there. So it's like a pretty impressive result. It's not, excessively better than like your top of the line mirrorless or like a Canon 80D or something like that. But it is still pretty good. You're getting maybe a half a stop to a full stop better dynamic range than those other cameras.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it seemed to me like they said 16. Anytime the manufacturer says that, that's like a theoretical maximum. It's probably not really going to be that good in practice, but it seems like it is actually really good. And I think they actually got better results whenever they shot at the higher res and downsampled.
Yeah, they did.
Which, at 12K, most people aren't going to be delivering in 12K. No. So like you could often probably shoot at that higher resolution and do the downsampling.
Yeah, I would expect that if you shot this thing in 12K or even 8K and delivered in 4, you're going to get close to 15 stops probably, something around 14.5 to 15, which is very impressive. That's kind of like Arri Mini LF territory, maybe like a little less. And obviously like the Arri's, 4 years old. And if you try to compare to the current Arri, which is like the Arri 35, it's not even anywhere close. Arri 35 does like over 17 stops. It's totally nuts.
Think about the price difference. I don't know how much Arri 35 is, but it's not 15K.
Well, it's like $70,000. You don't buy the right. Well, that's what we're talking about. Is like a Venice 2, an Arri Mini LF, or like a not V-Raptor. Those are really expensive $50,000, $60,000 cameras. V-Raptor's closer. That's like, $30,000, or just a Raptor might be $20,000. But even still, like this is competitive in dynamic range to those RED cameras. Yeah. And it's really good.
Yeah. Yeah. I was not expecting these results for the price.
Yeah, and like, so you're getting good rolling shutter, you're getting good dynamic range. And then when we did the latitude test, they were getting like 8 to 9 stops of latitude up or down, depending upon like where you shoot and like how far overexposed or underexposed you are, and like can you bring it back within like an acceptable range. 8 to 9 stops that's cinema camera territory. Like they are justified in calling this a cinema camera.
Yeah, I think they said it was like 1 stop worse than Airy or something.
Yeah, the Mini LF, I think that they were comparing it to it was about a stop, because I think that one's 10 and this one's like 8 or 9.
Yeah, but still very good.
Very good performance off of this sensor. So I don't know. I'm happy with what Blackmagic is doing here. I hope that I hope they sell a good number of these cameras, because it seems like this is really good, especially for the price.
Yeah.
And I think that it has a lot of potential, especially with that high resolution. That's what we talked about before, was like Blackmagic seems to really be pushing these high resolution sensors. And maybe that's something that we'll talk about in the next camera.
Foreshadowing.
Yeah. But like you look at your other, like your cinema cameras, like a Venice or an Airy or a Red, those are not 12K sensors. Like there may be, I think the Red's like 8K.
Yeah.
And the Airy is like 4K-ish or 6K. They're not really pushing these high resolutions. And I think that, to me, it seems like Blackmagic sees the market for like high resolution screens, like the Sphere in Las Vegas, and high resolution displays like a VR headset.
Yeah.
And then there is going to be a need for 12 plus K of resolution for certain applications. And they're just like getting ahead of it.
Yeah. Well, and I like to see them, delivering this level of performance, because even though this particular camera at 15K is probably more than I want to spend on a cinema camera, I mean, Blackmagic has all these other lower end cameras like the Pixis and the cinema camera and stuff, that come in, at a few $1,000s. And I have to imagine that if they're kind of working on this technology now and delivering good performance, and it seems like maybe, in the next few years, we could see some of that stuff starting to trickle down to the lower ends of their lineup. So maybe it's just kind of like a sign of things to come.
For sure.
But, I've never really felt like Blackmagic was kind of leading in these categories. Their cameras have always had kind of a certain look, and they've offered really good value for the money, but I've never felt like these particular features were things that I thought of when I thought of Blackmagic. And so it seems like maybe they're, doing some good research here, using good parts, and, kind of figuring out how to make that stuff work.
Yeah, Blackmagic's thing has always been, it's a function of workflow. The camera is in service of getting footage into Resolve and into their pipeline.
Yeah.
And it's all about like shooting this in RAW and then getting it into the software to develop and that sort of stuff. And it's kind of like their cameras have basically existed as like a capture extension of Resolve.
Yeah, it's a really interesting way to think about it, but I do think that's how they see it.
Yeah, it's like here is our pipeline. Use all of it. But they're competitive now with this cinema camera, which is really cool. I mean, I think that this perfectly competes with a C400.
Yeah.
And probably a little better. I mean, the C400 is cheaper, and I think this slotting in above it makes total sense.
Yeah. Pretty cool.
Very cool. So when are you going to get one?
It doesn't support L mount.
Oh, shoot. You're right. You know what? Too bad. If only it supported L mount.
Yeah. I've got other cinema cameras to buy.
Like this next one?
Should we talk about it?
Oh my gosh, Daniel.
I think we should. I did not see this one coming.
Left field.
Yeah.
Okay, so Fuji announced the development of the Fujifilm Eterna.
Did they? Now, is it the Eterna or is it the GFX Eterna? I don't know which one is the actual name.
And they, in quotes on their page, it is Fujifilm GFX Eterna.
Okay, so maybe that.
I just want, off the bat here, I want to say Eterna, as like obviously that's the name of one of their film simulations for their video stuff, and it's the name of one of their films that they've
clearly where the name came from.
Made for a very long time, since like the 30s. They've made Eterna film, I guess. I love it. I love the name.
It is a great name.
It's so good.
I mean, it sounds like a cinema camera. You got things like the Venice and Burano, and Eterna just feels like it fits right in there with those.
Oh yeah, it's just mwah, chef's kiss. Love it. Love it. Okay. I don't even know where to start. So they announced the development of this thing, and then they said, we're going to show it off at BEE 2024. And then they did.
Well, already delivering on their promises.
So I have for links here for you to throw in the show notes, a couple YouTube videos of people who saw it in person at BEE.
So it does exist.
And it was just like a mock-up probably. It probably didn't even have any technology in it. And then there's like the links to a press release.
Cool. Yeah. So they'll be in the notes.
Okay. So where do you want to start here, Daniel?
Man, good question. We need to cover what it is, but I, obviously also have a lot of thoughts on like Fuji doing this. Maybe let's just do a quick rundown of what it is in case people aren't familiar, and then go into kind of what we think about it.
Okay. So according to some of the interviews with Fujifilm executives, it is a GFX platform film making camera. Multiple times, interviewees had said, "Oh, this is a cinema camera," and they said, "No, this is a filmmaking camera." And they were very specific about how they wanted to brand it. One of the executives said, they're like, yes, it has basically the exact same pipeline as the GFX 100 Mark II." And I was like, oh, because he didn't say the second. And they were very specific about it being a GFX 100 the second.
Yeah. What do you think the deal's with that?
I think that the second is dumb. I think they should have called it the deuce.
Yes.
And now we're just calling it 2, which is what they should have done in the first place.
It's confusing branding.
And once again, confusing branding. This is a filmmaking camera. Doesn't take film. It's made by Fujifilm. It's called Eterna, which is a film, but anyways. So
all makes perfect sense.
Yep. So they making this filmmaking camera, and it is so like I want to just say it's a straight up repackaged GFX 102.
I mean, that's kind of what it feels like to me, where like similar to how Panasonic has done that, where they had the S1H and the BS1H, where they basically made it into a box camera and maybe added a couple of outputs. Kind of feels like that's what this is.
Yeah, so I want to say they were being cagey about it. Like in the press release and in a lot of the marketing material, they're very specific of like, this is what do they call it? I have it written down here somewhere. The 102 megapixel CMOS 2 HS sensor, which is the GFX 102 sensor. And then it's the X processor 5, which is the same processor. Yeah. Basically, that's in every Fuji camera for the last 2 years, but also in the GFX 102. And then they're like, here's a sample movie thing that somebody shot with the GFX camera. And like, if you want to know what it looks like, go look at these. And they're like pointing people to everything that's been shot on the 102, because this is basically that camera. I think that maybe it's all still in development. And so like people ask them, okay, well, like is this like just a reboxing? Like what does it going to support the same codecs? Fujifilm wouldn't answer that question. They wouldn't answer like, oh yeah, it's going to support the same raw codecs or whatever. I think that may still be a question mark. I think the media type may still be a question mark.
Yeah.
Like, is it going to be dual CF Express card slots? Is it going to be like a media module? We don't necessarily know that information, but I think generally from the image and the film simulations available and like what processor and sensor and autofocus system are in this camera, it is literally a GFX 100 Mark II.
Interesting. Yeah.
Which like that raises a lot of questions.
Sure does.
Because like, is that the right sensor combo for a cinema camera?
Yeah. Well, like when CineD does their testing of this one, you think they're going to be getting rolling shutter of 12 milliseconds?
I mean, I went back and pulled as much information as I could from the GFX 102 and like what its video specs and what it did, so we can kind of like remind everybody of that. But it was an interesting option, but like that camera, because of the size, the resolution, was compromised in like a bunch of different ways because of like, are you line skipping or are you cropping, and like how big of a sensor are you using, all this stuff.
Yeah, because 102 megapixels is like so like laughably far beyond what most cinema cameras are.
Is it 17K?
I don't know. Surely.
I don't actually know the resolution of a GFX 102.
Yeah, not sure either.
And my keyboard is not connecting.
Should have gotten the Apple one, I guess.
I guess so. I need a Bluetooth keyboard that doesn't have batteries. It is 400 megapixels, That doesn't sound right. For the Ultimate, the GFX 2 can produce an ultra high resolution 400 megapixel sensor. But what is the dimensions of the sensor? Anyways, Daniel, you figure that out. We're going to come back to this. Okay, so filmmaking camera, basically repackaged GFX 102. They said that they developed these in line. And so supposedly this camera has been in development for like 2 years, which for those counting, the GFX 102 came out last October, so a year ago. And so I think that they were developing both of these in tandem. And as far as like, why are they doing this? It seems like obviously everyone's been like, Fuji, make a film camera, make a film camera, make a film camera. They are hearing that pressure of, we love the way that the colors look for coming out of Fuji cameras, and we want those color options in something that's more cinema type. And so they're bringing the full line of film simulations plus F-Log2. I would assume F-Log2C, which is the extended gamma version of F-Log2.
I think it was. I think I saw that.
That didn't come back to the GFX 2 yet, or I guess it probably is. I don't remember what they announced in the software as far as like the firmware.
Yeah. I don't really pay much attention to GFX firmware updates.
Yeah, but like I assume that that's going to come with it, and so like it's going to have all of the color codec stuff for Fuji in basically like a full-on video camera, which is kind of cool and something that a lot of people have wanted for a while.
Yeah, because I mean, I don't know how much you mentioned it, but like the big thing that's different here is that they did kind of repackage it, and so it has a lot of the controls and inputs and outputs that you would expect from a cinema camera. Yeah,
definitely. I do want to run through what's on this camera. So I pulled pictures of the like video screen grabs and stuff from whenever, the live thing at BE. Mm-hmm. And I want to run through like what's on this camera. It has a screen on both sides.
It's very much like the Blackmagic.
Yeah, it's not a flippy screen, but like basically your camera operator side and your director side both have screens. Mm-hmm. So that's cool. It has a big fat giant record button on both the left side and the front. So you have and a grab button. So you have a screen, like a picture grab image button and a record button on both the front and the operator side. So cool to have dual. It has an AF/MF switch, so it is going to have autofocus. It has an ND switch, so it's going to have some sort of internal ND.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they've confirmed that. I think it has, optical ND, but I could be wrong.
Do we know if it's optical, or do we know if it, like, I didn't find anything to that effect, like optical versus electronic.
I thought I had seen something, but I could be wrong. So let's not say for sure.
Let's not say for sure, but regardless, it will have an ND on it.
Yes.
So that's cool. It has a 2-pin power on the front, so for powering your follow focus or whatever. It has a locking GF mount on the front of it, so I didn't even know the GF had locking option, but there is a lock option on the top of the front of the camera. So I'm not sure if they're going to like modifying the mount. They did announce that they are going to ship a new lens with this, which is a 32 to 90 millimeter GF lens. That's a power zoom.
Yeah, and the camera has power zoom controls on it.
Right. Yeah. So they're shipping a power zoom to go with this camera, and I'm curious if that one will have like a lock on the mount, or if that lock is to make it more functional with LPL.
Yeah.
The front of it does have little screw mounts. Like if you had a Prevista, was it Prima Vista or whatever, to mount on the front to like adapt to, you could like screw it in.
Because that's one of the big advantages of making something with this medium format sensor. Because remember when they released the GFX 2, they had that crazy diagram with all the different crops on it. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of like that was one of their big selling points, of saying you can use like all these random different types of lenses with it and like crop appropriately and all that. And we thought it was really weird at the time. It's like, who's going to do this? Mm-hmm. It makes a lot more sense on this camera.
Right, it does. And it seems like you can mount that alternate mount to it and then screw it in, which will make it secure. And that's like, you never really want like a loose adapter too. And that's the nice thing about cinema cameras, whenever you have like a fixed adapter. And that circle thing that you were talking about, that's like how the GFX system kind of works. It's like you pick like, what mode am I going to shoot in? Am I going to shoot in like GF mode, or like Premista, or 35 millimeter, or like an anamorphic, like wider field of view? And then from there you pick like, what format am I going to record to, like ProRes or H.265 or whatever, and then you pick your resolution, and then you pick your frame rate, and then you pick your data rate. And you basically have to follow that tree all the way down every time you want to change it. It is exhausting. It is definitely exhausting. And I think whenever we saw that on the GFX 2, we were like, oh man, it's like a cinema camera.
Yep.
And here we are.
Here we are.
Anyway. Okay, what else about this thing?
Let's see. Did you talk about how it has like gen lock and stuff?
Yeah. So if you're looking on the back, it looks like it has 2 or 3 SDI ports, an HDMI, a gen lock, USB-C, Ethernet, microphone, headphone, and I didn't see any obvious XLR ports.
It's kind of hard to tell. I'm looking at the back of the camera, and they've got these ports back there that I think at least some of those are BNC. But I'm wondering if one or more of those are XLR. It would be really surprising to me if they didn't put an XLR in this camera.
Yeah, that seems like a miss if they didn't.
Yeah.
They have a bunch of locking switches on here that I don't know what are for. A lot of custom buttons too.
Is that a V mount on the back?
That is a V mount on the back.
Oh, that's cool.
Yep.
I like that.
Plus for a V mount. It also has this this handle that seems like you can include with it, and then there is a cable where you can run from the V mount plate to the back to the handle. So there's power pass through to the handle, and then the handle itself has a button for the a tight wide, like a zoom button.
Yeah, like a zoom rocker.
Yeah, and it's got a record and a function and a joystick, so you can kind of like change your menus with the little joystick or like your focus point, and then it has ND control as well.
Is that what the big knob on the side is?
Yeah, exactly.
That's not focus.
Yep, no, that's a ND control.
Interesting.
Yeah,
that's
pretty
cool. I like it.
A pretty full featured handle.
Yeah,
it's not clear how you put a screen on this thing yet. I would expect the hot shoe is probably hot based upon like
hot shoe's hot.
I mean, it has contacts on it, and like you're running power from the V mount through it. But there's no like obvious place for where the screen mounts. I assume they would mount off the handle and then you would run USB-C to the screen.
Yeah.
They're not showing it with a screen. They haven't announced a screen. The ones on the side don't appear to flip out. They appear to just be fixed to the side of the camera. This is all like in development. And so, things can and will change.
Yeah.
But it is interesting to like, we're waiting on seeing what is the viewfinder or screen solution look like for this thing.
Yeah, I agree with that. By the way, I'm looking at the side of it, and I do see where there's a mark that says mic, so there is some sort of mic jack.
Okay, good. Well, then it seems like it's a 3.5 millimeter in mic jack. I hope that there's some sort of solution for like XLR. I know that there's that TAC whatever thing that you can get for Fuji cameras that has like goes into the hot shoe and has the XLRs and that sort of thing. I assume that would work here.
Yeah, I imagine
it would be cool if it was also built in. So we'll see. We'll see whenever they finally release this thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's basically everything that's worth kind of talking about as far as like the physicality of the camera. It seems like it has everything. Like I'm going down the list of like what do I want out of a cinema camera, and it feels like they hit all the spots. Because it has the ND, I doubt it has IBIS, but maybe it does. The GFX has IBIS. So like TBD on whether or not it has any sort of stabilization built in, but barring that, it has like all of the connection things that you would probably need. I would assume that one of those SDIs are probably like one 10G and one 3G or whatever. And like it's cool that it has Ethernet, probably supports camera to cloud out the box.
I'm curious to see what the storage situation is going to be like. But then the other thing is, with this being a GFX camera, I have to imagine they will offer compressed codecs, and that's something that now I pay attention to with these sorts of cameras because that's been a blocker for me. On some of the things I've considered is, like having to do a raw type workflow. But surely Fuji's going to offer that with they already have that capability, with the GFX.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm expecting that this is going to be very, very, very similar to what the GFX does.
Yeah.
I mean, it's essentially a repackaged GFX, but in a way cooler body.
I mean, yeah, this if you want to use it for cinema use, this makes so much more sense than using a GFX 102. Like,
I want the next XH camera, like the XH3S, to be this.
yeah, or offer it in this form factor.
Mm-hmm. Like make an XH3 that's a standard camera, an XH3S that's a box camera.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it'd be great.
I'd be super down. Somebody asked, one of the people asked them if, hey, so since you're doing this for GFX, are you going to do this for X mount? And they were like, well, that's a different mount, so it would be totally different. It's like, then you didn't answer the question.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
They're never going to answer the question.
Yeah, I mean, they'll either release it or they won't.
Like, that was the conclusion that we came to on the GFX 102 was the XH2S is kind of just a better video camera.
Mm-hmm.
Which is, so it's weird to me that they're making the GFX 102 a cinema camera.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it kind of comes down to why did they originally make why did they make the GFX 100, the Deuce, have all these video features? And that's a question we asked at the time because it didn't make sense.
Yeah.
I think this makes it make more sense because they were developing all those things anyway. But yeah, it's like, why do they have this? And to me, I think it comes back to the mount. Like having that large, medium format sensor, I feel like they see that as opening up options for using different sorts of lenses, pre-mesta lenses and all that, and these anamorphic modes and stuff. And I feel like that's why they're pushing it. Like that's what they think sets them apart and why they would use GFX over X mount.
Yeah, I think that does kind of make sense. There's a lot of options, and it's really hard to talk about like how good this sensor is for video without like going down a massive rabbit hole of like what are you shooting in? Because if you're shooting in 4K line skipped versus 4K oversampled from an 8K section of the sensor versus shooting 8K open gate or like full GF 8K, it all changes. Like you're going to be, if you're shooting in just like the center 35 millimeter portion of the sensor that is like pixel for pixel, I'm going to shoot just 35 millimeter in the middle or whatever. Like that's going to have a totally different dynamic range and rolling shutter performance compared to like if you're downsampling from a full GF, whatever. And you may get like 14-ish stops of dynamic range from like the full resolution downsampling, but you're going to get like a 26 millisecond rolling shutter.
Yeah.
Or you could shoot in 4K line skipped up to like 60 frames per second and get something closer to maybe like 15 milliseconds of rolling shutter, but now you're going to lose a stop or two of dynamic range because now you're dealing with like less like physical sensor size and less data. And that's been the whole conversation about the GFX 102 is like, this is massively versatile, but you're never getting the same dynamic range or rolling shutter performance across the huge variety of modes.
Yeah. If those are things you care about, it's going to be complicated to figure out what settings to use.
Right. And this camera is like, it's not doing anything special like the 14-bit readout that we get on the XH2S because it's just too slow. So you're going to be a standard 12-bit readout. You're going to have 6 stops of latitude, which like we just finished talking about that 17K Ursa camera that's doing 9 stops of latitude.
12K one.
Yeah, the 12K is doing 9 stops of latitude. That's way, way better than this thing. And it's like, well, is this going to be substantially cheaper? I mean, what does a Canon C400 cost?
Like $8,000 or something.
$8,000.
Yeah.
A GFX 102 costs $7,500.
Yeah.
And so I think like they haven't announced a price for this thing, but to me it seems like this has to cost as much or less than a C400.
I think it's I think it's going to cost more than the GFX 2 because
yes, for sure.
Because this is going to be probably a lower volume product, and it's new. Like if nothing else, it's new, and it has, I would say, it has more than the GFX has.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
It seems like it would be more expensive, but I do think if they surge past that 8,000 for the C400, it's going to be a rough.
And like maybe
comparison.
you could say, hey, look, you have more options for this thing. Like, sure, it doesn't have triple base ISO, and the noise performance isn't going to be as good as a C400, but you can shoot in a much higher resolution. You can shoot in a larger image circle, and
you have all the different mounts and stuff.
Yeah,
you probably don't
and
get that on the C400.
And so like it's like maybe like you could see an argument for why this might be more expensive than a C400, and it's like I think that this could get as costly as maybe $10,000, maybe with whatever mount and whatever viewfinder. But to me, if this crosses into the 5-figure mark, it's kind of a problem.
Yeah, I think so too. What do you think about them calling it a filmmaking camera rather than a cinema camera? What distinction do you think they're trying to draw there?
I think that's just Fujifilm.
You think that is?
I think that they understand that the color science stuff that they do, that the film simulations are a strength for them, that having these looks that they've fabricated, people really like the way that Fujifilm stuff looks. And if you're not shooting in full RAW in video, like, which most people aren't, most people are not shooting RAW for video. That's probably, I don't know how true that is. I feel like most people aren't shooting RAW for video. And so like having a look baked in or like some sort of flexibility matters a lot. And like maybe we're all shooting in log anyway, and so that kind of is a moot point. But if you're just like straight up delivering, having some really nice footage options and look options available is a big appeal of the Fuji system. And a lot of people want to shoot more video with Fuji stuff. And so I think that they're just leaning into that of like film simulations, film making, film look, and they really want to like be thought of as like Fujifilm, but like the digital version.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I think they mean something by the distinction. I don't think they're just being pretentious about it. But I think that when you start digging into like what does it mean, it does sort of sound pretentious, because it's basically like you want the Fuji color science. Maybe you're using the camera more because of the look it gives you than anything about its technical performance. Because whereas like maybe you pick to use a Blackmagic Ursa Cine because you want that really fast rolling shutter, or maybe you pick a Canon C400 because you want Canon autofocus, like those probably are not reasons you're picking this camera, but it's more about, I really like the colors I get.
Right.
And, this camera gives me the look that I want for my film.
Yeah, I mean, that's a lot of reason why people will shoot ARRI is like the latitude and the dynamic range, and then ARRI C-Log are huge reasons why you're going to shoot with an ARRI. And I think that, Fuji wants to be that. The F-Log 2 being bound to Rec 2020, like for mirrorless cameras, fine. Like it's perfectly fine for log profile and for like the raw profiles and stuff. But once you start playing in cinema camera territory, you have to have good like raw codecs and like wide log codecs, because people are going to want to be able to push that that footage around and have a lot of like safety net for what they're shooting. And it's good that they are starting to like, okay, now we need F-Log 2C because we know that we need a wider color gamut, and we need to like add waveforms and like all these other features. And it feels like their cameras were really good for what they were as like a $2,500 mirrorless camera that is like, it's missing maybe a few features like time code and what have you, but I can shoot in 720 megabit per second all intra with like a decent log codec and get like really good footage out of it. But that footage, despite how like flexible and good it is for that cost bracket, like if you get into the 10,000 plus cost bracket, it's not as competitive. It's not something like Red Raw is going to be way more flexible. And so I'm expecting this to be able to shoot in ProRes, but it's going to have good raw codecs. And like, I haven't shot a lot with any of like Fuji's raw stuff. I know that like you can do B raw, and I know that you can do ProRes raw, but I like it. How are they encoding it? And like, is that good off the sensor? Is it going to be competitive with something like NRAW, or not NRAW, but Red Raw? Because like Nikon's has started making it so that you can do like Red Raw conversions with NRAW. And I'm expecting that like new Nikon cameras that are going to come out are going to have some sort of Red Raw option in them.
Seems likely.
And like the Canon, like the C-Log Lite stuff is, I don't know how good their raw stuff is either. It's probably fine. But I just like, it has to be more than what we're getting out of like an XH2S and like a GFX 100 II now. And so I'm hoping that whenever this finally releases, it has better codecs and better like raw footage options that is more cinema-like, and they're not just leaning really hard on shooting in like baked in color profiles.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. People definitely expect to have that capability at the price that this is probably going to be at. So, I mean, it makes sense they need to do it. But I don't know. I mean, I guess where I end up on this is I'm really encouraged and happy to see Fuji like pushing into this space, because it felt to me like the GFX 100, the second, the Deuce, the second, whatever.
Yep, you got it.
It felt like that camera, like they were kind of half-heartedly going into video stuff. We were really confused. Like, why are they pushing all these video features? And it felt like, I think I remember saying at the time, it's going to be one of those things where Fuji, gets 90% of the way there and just like doesn't get the ball over the line. And this feels like, okay, like they're actually following through, like they're trying to play in the cinema style space. And I think that's cool. And it makes me hopeful that maybe there would be a future XH series camera that, is this for Super 35. Like, give me the equivalent of a Canon C80 that uses Fuji X mount. Like, that'd be pretty cool to see.
I would feel complete as a person if like I have my XT5 40 megapixel. I love that camera. Thank you for selling it to me. And I love my XH2S for video, and I have my video camera, my photo camera. If I just upgrade that XH2S into like a real deal box cinema style camera, I'm like, here's my video camera, and it's like Super 35 and has all this stuff, man. Ooh,
it'd be fantastic.
I'd be so happy.
Yeah. And so I still don't know if that's happening. And knowing Fuji, if it does happen, it's, 4 years from now.
Yeah.
But, this at least gives me more hope that it could happen, because they're clearly trying to, like move into this. But this camera particularly, I don't think is for me, because I think it's too much on the artsy side. And I feel like it's going to be, for the price it's going to cost, I think it's going to be a little bit too compromised in some of the technical ways for me to be interested in it.
Yeah, I think that the lens situation is very much geared towards like cinema stuff. Obviously, like you could shoot with GF lenses, which are huge and expensive. You could go down the line of shooting like Primista or whatever the 35 mount is, probably like Arri PL or something like that. But all those lenses are going to be really expensive. And like it's like you are really needing to get into the cinema world, and that's maybe harder than like, oh, I'm just going to buy some Sigma L mount stuff and shoot on a Blackmagic camera.
Yeah, but I mean, like, if I imagine this camera is somewhere between $8,000 and $10,000, it just kind of makes me think, like, do I pick this over a C400? Do I pick this over a theoretical FX6 Mark II? Like, I feel like the answer to both of those for me would be no. Like, I think I'd rather have, either of those things where I've got, more somewhat affordable lens options, probably better technical capabilities, and then just rely on color grading to make up the difference in the look.
Yeah, we'd have to see where the lenses land. I would say an FX6 II would be definitely my choice over something like this, but I could see myself wanting something like this Eterna over a C400, because I'm just like a Fujifilm shill. But I like they are like to the point on like the Fuji getting 90% there and never kind of like getting over the line. It feels like they are doing everything they can here to actually succeed. Like they've already started working with Cooke, and Cooke is going to release one of their 65mm format Pancro lenses. Not one of their 65mm format Pancro lenses will be compatible with this camera.
Oh, okay.
And so like they're already going to have like large enough 65mm format Cooke lenses that can go on this thing, which like, delicious.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like regardless of what they price this at, it's going to be effectively for productions that are like at a higher level than what you and I are, what you would be doing.
For sure. I did want to maybe make a note on like as far as sensor size, because that's like where does this land? Because whenever we were talking about the GFX 2 originally, we're like, wow, this is a pretty big sensor. And so if you're wanting to shoot in something like 65 millimeter, can this, like, it's not that big. It's not big enough for a 65 millimeter sensor, but is it closer or close enough or to like be better than just shooting like 35 millimeter and trying to mix the footage?
Yeah, like could this pair well with a 65 millimeter?
Yeah. And so like I kind of wanted to like compare to a few different cinema cameras here. And so like if you're shooting on the new Blackmagic Ursa Cine 17K, which is a 65 millimeter equivalent sensor size, basically, it's essentially the 17K. Isn't the 17K like two 12Ks next to each other?
I don't know if it's that big.
It's not that big, but it's 50.8 millimeters by 23.3 millimeter.
Okay,
so roughly 50 by 24. The Eterna is going to be 44 by 33 or 42 by 32.
It's a little taller, but it's not as wide
because it's a photo camera. It's like the full 3x2, and so a lot of these like actual video cameras scrunch down on the vertical resolution, which helps with the readout speed.
Sure.
And like the Fujifilm, you can shoot in those wider resolutions and just ignore the top and the bottom and like get faster readout speeds. So like you have all of the options, which is cool, I guess. But it's like a 43 millimeter width. The Alexa 65 millimeter is a 54 millimeter width. So
that's the widest.
Yeah. So an Alexa 65 is going to be basically the biggest size sensor that you're going to get for like a digital camera. I think that's true. And then the one right behind it is going to be that 17K Blackmagic camera that's going to come out, which is at 50 millimeter. And then you have I guess this is basically going to be the next closest thing.
Yeah, it's at 43.8 compared to 50 or 54.
Yeah, and so it's like third in the list of sensor width. It's actually surprisingly not that far off of a V-Raptor. The V-Raptor is 40 millimeters wide, which is different than like a standard 36 by 24. The V-Raptor large format is actually like a little bigger than your standard 35 mil, which is kind of cool.
Really, you call it 41, 40.96.
Yeah, 41. So like I think that the Eterna is actually closest to the V-Raptor in size as far as considering as like a large format, which just makes sense for like Primista and all that sort of stuff. So it doesn't exactly compare with shooting in 65 millimeter. You could use a 65 millimeter lens on it, which will be slightly bigger, but it is, I guess, cool to have what could potentially be a sub 10. I don't know if that's true. Call it a $10,000 camera that can shoot as close to 65 as it can, right? Because the next option up is the V-Raptor at, $25,000. And then I think that the Cine 17K was going to be like 20 or 25. And then like the Alexa 65 is as much as like a house.
Yeah. You're renting that and buying it.
Yeah, you're renting that. And I think that like as far as where they're trying to position this, they're not positioning this as like a rental camera. They want it to be purchasable. And I think that they're like premium affordable or whatever is the price bracket that Fujifilm is shooting for.
I'm really thinking it's going to be around 10,000.
Yeah, that sounds right. Like 9999999 kind of thing.
I mean, considering that the capabilities are about on par with the GFX, like it's really just the casing that's different. I think they would have a hard time charging more than $2,500 extra for this because like at some point it's like, are people just going to buy the GFX instead?
Yeah, for sure. Fujinon Primista has a 46.3 millimeter image circle.
There you go.
Cool. So it's just basically perfect. I didn't know that Fuji made the Primista lenses. That's cool.
That makes sense that they would want to support them.
So they support Ariel F and Red Monstro and Sony and man, that's cool. No wonder they're so like super into the Primista.
Now we get it.
Yeah. Fuji's been making cinema lenses for a while. They make good cinema lenses.
Yeah.
People use them. They make good broadcast lenses. And so it's like they're already in this space. And so then like if you listen to some of the interviews, like, yeah, we this isn't new to us. We just haven't made a camera like this.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. I think it's going to be really cool. I think it's not going to be for me and it's not going to be for you, but I hope that it's for somebody and I hope that it works out really well. Did
they say when this was coming out? 2025 sometime? Or?
I think that they're shooting for 2025. It's in quote unquote development. So I would expect it to probably be another year.
Yeah.
I think that they have been working on it for so long that they felt the need to announce it.
Yeah. Well, I think it makes sense to do that. And I feel like with stuff like this, part of why they want to announce it is because they're going to be having people use it before it releases.
For sure.
And they probably want to be able to work with, directors or something to get this used in some projects. And so, at some point you have to kind of pull the curtain back a little bit. But it makes me interested to see what else they might do. Like, would they bring any of the software features to their other cameras? Please, please, please. But, also like what could this mean for the XH3S? Maybe nothing, but we can hope.
How long was it between the XH1 and the XH2?
I feel like it was a pretty long time, wasn't it?
I think it was like 4 years, 3 years, something like that. I'm surprised at how long it's been since the XH2 came out.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's going to be 3 years next May.
Yeah, I mean that could be the earliest I would think they would announce a new one, but it could very easily be another year.
Yeah, I'm not expecting a new XH camera next year.
Well, it's still really good. Like
it is very good.
I mean, we obviously talk about things that could be better, but still, when we talk about new cameras, it's very competitive with newer things. There are very few cameras that have something that's just not, that totally outclasses the XH2S. So I don't see them releasing a new one in 2025. I mean, it's just like it hasn't gotten old enough yet.
Yeah, for sure. But I don't know. To your point, Fuji is very much like we're going to make one like core chunk of technology and then put it in every camera that we can, which is like literally what they're doing here is a classic Fuji playbook of like we've already built the GFX and we're just going to stick that into a different body. And like that's what they used to do with all their other systems. Like the XT50 and the XT5 are the same processor and the same sensor. Like that's just what they do. I want them to like do that with their software down the line still. And like it's like we're waiting and waiting and waiting. And like they announced the F-Log2C thing and that hasn't come yet. But I'm just hoping that when that comes, like they bring all of the cinema features that they're sticking in the GFX cameras. It's been a year. I thought that we would have like waveform and stuff at this point, and like we're just still waiting.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's why I haven't updated my firmware. Just waiting on those features.
Just waiting. Like some of the complaints that like I've seen surrounding this camera is like, boy, it sure feels like Fuji's supply chain and their R&D department are already stretched thin because we're just waiting and waiting and waiting for like, oh, this new feature came out with a new camera. Like, am I going to get that feature? And it's just like doesn't ever seem to come. Like they'll announce a firmware thing and then it's like 6 months before it even rolls out.
Yeah. And it's kind of like, it's great that you guys are making this cinema camera, but like also can you support the rest of us that have already given you money? Because that'd be cool.
Yeah. So it's like now they have a more lens, power zoom lenses and cinema lenses to make for GFX and blah, blah, blah. And so I don't know. It feels like things are just going to take longer.
It's interesting. It's exciting in some ways to see them pushing more into video. And then, in other ways, it's kind of like, I hope that doesn't take resources away from the stuff that I'm using. Yeah.
We need more people to buy X100 cameras to support these cameras so that we can get the firmware that we want.
There you go. Everyone, you've got a job to do. That's it for the show today. Thanks for joining us. And if you liked it, tell a friend so they can check it out too. You can find out more about the show at www.cameragearpodcast.com, and you can find us on Twitter @CameraGearPod. We'll be back with more next week.